go over is how to use a segue. So the idea is you can tap on a label. So I want to be able to tap on a label to go from this interface, and this will take us to another interface via a segue. So in the process, we're going to learn how to create another interface controller and how to hook up its action with our other interface, kind of pass context between the two, pass data between the two interfaces. So first of all, I'm going to go to my editor page here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my objects library, and I'm going to pass in another interface controller. Right, so we'll bring that in, we'll plop it down right here. Okay, so now we have two interface controllers. And what we need to do is we need to figure out how to hook up some kind of action on this interface controller to some kind of action over on this interface controller. So the way to do that, well, first of all, we need to connect them, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our bottom table to do this. So basically when I tap one of these, I want it to take us to another screen. That means I need to connect that table in terms of its controller, and whenever the group is tapped on, I want to transfer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the group here from my second table, Control, click, and I'm just going to drag it over. And you can see it's going to plop down. It's going to ask me what type of selection segue I want to use. We're going to go with push. So when we say push, that'll push this interface over here on the right into the screen. And then as you can see, there's kind of a little arrow pointing back. So that's how it's going to take us back to the previous view. Now, as for what I want to display on this second interface controller, well, let's put in maybe a label. And let's keep it simple at first. We'll just create a static label. And I'm going to, let's see, how should I do this? Let's make it, let's make it like red, maybe. Keep up with our theme of using red. And should we make the font maybe a little bit bigger? Yeah, so make it 24 in terms of the font size. And let's position it in the center and vertical center it as well. And yeah, let's just size it to fit content. Okay, this is just pure appearance stuff. Otherwise, it's just a normal label object. So next what we're going to do is we're going to create a file to take care of this controller. So if I look at our assistant editor here, so this is all the files for our main interface controller. Right? So it controls all the aspects of the view here, but we need another file to control the aspects of the view for this interface controller over on the right. So let's do that. I'll pop out my little navigation panel here, and I'm just going to go to my WatchKit extension, create a new file. Okay, and I definitely want it to be a WatchKit class file. And yours may default here to NS object. That's what we were using previously, right? It was NS object, but that's not what we want to do. We want this to be a WatchKit interface controller. And let's call this one maybe second interface controller. That sounds like a fine name to me. Okay, and where to save it? We'll just save it with the same in the same folder as everything else. Okay, you can see it generated down here. And if we look at it, it looks pretty much like our main interface controller did when we first started up the app. Right, so this is just another interface controller, and we just basically control it the same way we would any other interface. So for example, if we wanted to grab our label and make an outlet and then set it programmatically, we could definitely do that here. But let's not do that for now. So let's go back to our interface storyboard here. And in fact, I do want to connect the label as an outlet because I want to be able to set it once I get the info from the previous interface. So let us go to our storyboard, and I'll pop that guy back over. Whoops, wrong panel. Grab this one. We'll go to our assistant editor, but I'm going to make sure that I'm in the right code. So I'll go to the second interface controller. Okay, so I'm going to control click, bring this over. Okay, should allow me to put it somewhere. You know what? I did forget one important step. So I need to tell it what class this belongs to, of course. Okay, so we'll go to the identity inspector, and we just have to tell it you are second interface controller. Okay, so now the code knows what to do with it. So now we'll be able to click and drag that label because it knows that it's connected to this backend code. Yeah, there we go. My title label Okay, so now we have an outlet that we can play with when we have data to put to it. So the next thing we need to understand is how we can get data from the previous interface controller into the new interface controller, the second one. And you can see we are able to get the context. So when it awakes, it looks for context. So context is essentially how we pass data from one interface to another. Now let's go back from this code into our main interface controller code. Okay, so what we want to do is give the code context for the segue. So if I pop this little panel out and we look at interface controller, we can see that there is this push segue now. Right, so it's kind of showing us what's going to trigger the segue. So when we tap on this label, and this is what it looks like. It's a little symbol with an arrow pointing to the left. So now we have a segue that we can kind of manipulate in our code. Okay, so that means, let me put this under my did deactivate, but above my other code, we can override func context for segue. Right, so this is what we want to use, context for segue. And we are passing data via context, basically. So as you can see here, returns the context object to pass to the specified interface controller when a row in a table is tapped. And that's exactly what we need here. Right, so I'm going to tab this through so it auto-completes. And you can see segue identifier string in table, watch interface table, row index int. So it's able to pick up what row was tapped on, and then it'll basically pass the context into the other object. And the way we can do that is we can basically say return, and let's just try something simple at first. So we'll try test. Okay, so we'll just return a string, and this way we'll be able to kind of retrieve it over on the other side. And then we can figure out how to pass actual data back and forth here. But first, we'll figure out how to get it to display something in the first place. So I'm going to go to my second interface controller.swift, and in my super.awake, or in my func_awake method, we will basically go like this. Var string will be a type of string equals context as string. And we have to downcase it to string, to the string class, because otherwise it's a context type object and it won't know what to do. So we have to tell it explicitly that it's a string. Now it doesn't have to be a string. It could be other types of objects as well. But in our case, we just want to display a string on our label object. Right, so that's how we can do that. And then we can say self dot my title label dot set text, and we'll throw in the string there. Okay, so that's the theory. Yeah, this can be a constant. That's the theory. Let's see if it is actually working, and then we can figure out our logic there to pass actual information back and forth. Okay, build succeeded. That's a plus. So we will load this up. There it goes. All right, fingers crossed. I'm going to tap one of these objects. And hey, there we go. You can see we passed the context and we transformed it into a string. And now it's showing us the text we told it to display. Pretty neat, right? And these up here, they don't have a segue attached to them, so they're not going to do anything when we tap on them, other than what we told it to do previously, of course. And now we can go there and back, and there and back. So let's figure out how to display some information, basically. So back to our interface controller. Now there is a slight bit of difficulty here, and it's because of the way we're setting up our label information. So because we're just setting it programmatically at the time, there's actually no way to get the text out of a label. That's not possible, only set text method. So we can set it but not get it. So if we want to actually pass that string, well, we need to basically have something that records the string, basically. So instead of setting it programmatically like so, let's set it up so we're doing it similar to how we do our fruits array. And that way we'll be able to kind of pass it back and forth, right? Because I can't really say myLabel.getText, it wouldn't work. So we'll just do, let's see, we have 4, I think. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll do an array with 4 items in it. So let greetings equal. Hi there. Hello. What else? Hey. And how you doing? Or howdy. Yeah, sure, howdy. Okay, so we have 4 items in our array. Now we can kind of adjust our logic here as well. So index in. Yeah, let's do, so instead of index set 0 dot dot less than 4, let's do 0 dot 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 greetings dot count. Okay, and then here we can do like we did up above. So for index and greeting in greetings dot enumerated. Okay. Okay, now when we do set text, we can just do whatever greeting we're on at any given index. Okay, and now this should work pretty much the same as before. And now we can, you know what, let me comment this out before we try to do this, just to make sure that there's no errors here in the way we set it up before we take another step here. Okay, build succeeded. There it goes. Okay, so it's still working. And now we're getting different, oops, we have too many, but now we're getting different labels, so that's good. So let's fix that slight problem here. Right, index, of course. So we have to do dot dot less than greetings dot count, and that should fix that. We won't have too many labels then, or too many rows rather. Okay, build succeeded. And now what we can do is here in our context for segue, we can actually just return whatever index we are on. Right, so that's working just great. So we can return greetings at any given row index. Right, and then this should pass that index because our greetings here, it's immutable. So according to how we set it up, it's not going to change. So we can just declare, okay, whatever index is selected in the table, we will just pass that back into the other interface controller. Okay, now let's try it out. That's the theory. We'll see if it actually works here. Loading it on up. Okay. Cool. So let's try tapping it. And there we go. So we are passing that data into our other interface controller, and that will be handy. So that's a string. Let's see about passing a different type of data. So if, for example, we wanted to pass, for some reason, an integer, like so. Okay, so we're returning an integer. If we try this, it'll probably crash. So we have to tell it over here. So instead of string, we have to say, okay, let string equals integer. And then we have to say context as int. Right? And now we just convert it into an actual string, like so. Okay, let's see. Oh, it's unhappy about something. Okay, right, we have to put it in quotation marks. Like so. Okay, let's try that out. Let's see if we're passing the context. And this is just to show that, again, context, it doesn't need to be a string. It can be whatever type of thing you need it to be. Okay, so far so good. No crashes. Let's tap. Yeah, so there we go. Right, so we can just directly pass absolute data if we ever needed to, but probably going to be pretty rare where you're going to need to do that. Right, you're passing a context, so the data is usually going to be contextual. But that is how we can do a very basic segue. Okay, I'm going to reset this to how it was. Cool. segues if you wanted to. You just have to hook up the logic accordingly. So what does that mean? Well, let's go ahead and let's add in another segue here. So let's say I wanted my top labels, so my labels that are part of my row controller, to also have kind of the same action. So if I control click on this group and tab, bring it over, let's say we want a push type selection segue. Right, so now you can see there's two symbols there. And now if I launch it in the simulator, let's see if it works already. Right, because we already set it up to understand the context. So it's not going to have the right data when we tap it, but it should take us to this second interface controller. Right, so there it goes. I tap it. Okay, and it's showing me greeting in index position 0 here, kind of the same idea, and it still works down here as well. So if we don't want that to happen, we want to kind of do a check on which table was tapped on. Well, that is actually super simple. So here's our context for segue. So we can say if the table, right, because it has that in its arguments here. So if table is my second table, then we will return this. Else, or no, we'll do another if statement actually. If table equals my table, return fruits at the given index, row index. Right? And now because we need to return something, right, because it's looking for any kind of return, and make sure I spell fruits correctly there. Fruits. So if either of these don't work for whatever reason, we'll just return error or something. Not super descriptive, but it should work at least. Okay, let's try that out, see if it works. And again, it's just to show you that these segues, they're pretty flexible in what they allow you to do here. Wait for that to load up in the simulator. Okay, there it goes. So let's try it again. So tap. Hey, there we go. Right, so we can reuse it if we need to, provided we need to pass the same kind of information, right? So, I mean, if you're doing this, chances are you would only have one table anyway. It's pretty rare to have multiple tables on one interface, but if you do, you just have to know how to put in your checks and your if-else statements, for example. We can figure out how to use some page-based navigation. So the option we saw when we first set up our table, we can actually enable it now that we have kind of a detail page. Right? So I'm going to highlight this table, the top one, my table, and I'm just going to enable vertical detail paging. And what this does is basically when you load up, the details page, whenever we tap on a label here, you can then use the digital crown to kind of scroll up and down through the other options. So all I needed to do was check vertical detail paging for our situation here. And then we should be able to do just that. So don't even really need to change anything here. So basically it's going to take the fruits at the row index, and otherwise it's going to know that we're passing it the fruits object, which is an array. So basically we can kind of scroll through using the digital crown, which is kind of nice if that's something you think your users would want. Right, so build succeeded, and we'll just test it out to demonstrate it. But that's really all there is to it. So really we needed the second interface to be able to use that. But for example, if I tap on oranges, now I'm simulating scrolling, and we can scroll down to the next one, and so on. Right, so now because this table has that enabled, this is an option. And that's kind of neat. And notice I did not enable it on the lower table, so I'm trying to scroll, but it doesn't allow me to scroll. So if you want that page-based navigation, by all means, go ahead and implement it. And you just have to make sure that you're passing in the correct data again when you are calling the segue function.